The flip side of the perspective in the last video about the humanity of the Bible is the divinity of the Bible. I believe that we must take the divinity of the Bible as seriously as the humanity of the Bible. It might be easier for a lot of you who are watching this video to get this concept than it was to get the concept in the last video. After all, it's kind of the natural stance of modern-day Christians to believe that the Bible was divinely inspired in some way or another. But that belief is fairly nuanced in its understanding. Some people believe that the Bible was inspired in such a way that God dictated word for word into the ears of the author exactly what to write down, so that there is not one word that God didn't say for the author to write. Others believe that God inspired in a more general way the truths and the experiences of the authors, orchestrating them so that the authors would write in their own voice the truth of what God was trying to convey to all of us. Still others might believe that the ancient texts within the biblical collection contain real experiences of humans with the divine nature of God, but that God had no part at all in the orchestrating or writing or inspiring of the process of authors writing these experiences down. You may hold one of these viewpoints, or you might not. You might be suspicious about the idea of divine involvement in human existence, or you may be doubtful of a divine existence at all. That's okay. I'm not here to try to convert you to one particular viewpoint. I believe that the principles that I am teaching are applicable to a myriad of viewpoints. And I just hope that you would embark and engage this journey with an openness to pursue any of these viewpoints, trusting that in some way God or truth will lead you. And if you don't believe at all, at least having the concept that engaging in the Bible's own claims about divine existence is a worthwhile endeavor, because for most of human history, most humans have believed that there's a divine interference or divine origin to the created order. I also want to be pretty clear with you about my own standpoint. I do believe there is a God, and I do believe that that God orchestrated the events and the authors which led to the writing and the collection of what we know today as the Bible. Now, how that process happened exactly, I don't know. And frankly, I don't think that I should know, or I don't really care to know. For me, that's a part of what having faith is about. Instead, I think that the stories within Scripture that explain experiences people have had with the divine make sense to the reality that I experience on a daily basis. And I think that the story that unfolds in the Scriptures about this God who loves his creation so much that he's gone to such great lengths to let us know that is a pretty compelling one. If there is a God, then it stands to reason that we would know very little about that God unless that God decided to introduce himself to us. It would be a lot like me trying to claim I know another human being or I know about another human being, but I've never had any interaction with them in my entire life. To really know someone, you have to interact with them. And so if God wanted us to know something about himself, then he would have to reach down and say hello. Let us know about who he is. And so this is where the Bible begins to share with us the story of a one nation's experience with this God of all things, and how that God of all things made that nation's story into a story that tells all of humanity the love that God has for us. Regardless of how you think God may have put together the books that we now have in the biblical collection, or whether you don't believe them at all, we must acknowledge that there's something going on here much more deep than just a purely human endeavor. I mean, even if you don't believe in any God at all, You have to acknowledge that these texts share the experiences of humans from ancient times as they tried to make sense of the reality around them. A pretty stinking deep concept. But regardless of where you fall in these things, it's my belief that the Bible is even deeper than just that idea of trying to make sense of reality. In my experience, I think the Bible accurately depicts a different human beings' experiences with the God of all things, conveying the truth of who that God is as that God reaches down and says hello and initiates a relationship with us. The divinity of these biblical texts seems to stand in tension with the humanity of these texts. It seems like to us that both the divine origin and the human origin can't be both the truth. That it's impossible for the text to be both divine and human in nature. And yet, when we encounter paradoxes like this, where we're told two truths that don't seem to fit together, it usually means we're missing a piece of the puzzle. We can't see the whole thing, and so it doesn't make sense to us right now. And maybe one day we will get to see that missing connection between these two, and we'll all understand more clearly. But for the here and now, the paradox has to remain, and the tension will be how we live. And this tension actually creates the same spirit of humility in our approach to the scriptures that even just looking at the humanity alone does. It reinforces that spirit of humility. If God really exists and orchestrated the events and the authors to write those events down into the collection that we have and we know as the Bible today, then it really moves us to have to study this and take it seriously with incredible thought. And we must enter into the text with no assumptions and no baggage. Instead, enter into the land of the text with an openness to learn from the experiences of those who came before us and those who might just be wiser than us. In any case, if you embark on this journey to study these ancient texts with us, and you decide at the end that it's all hooey and it's not for you, the worst that you've done is you've become a little bit more cultured about a particular part of human history and thinking. Probably a more worthwhile way to spend your time than binging whatever the new show is on the internet. If you already believe, then I challenge you to hold in tension and be okay with the tension between the divine nature and the human nature of these texts. Approach these texts with a sense of humility. Not having your answers already figured out and bringing those answers to the text, or assuming that you know everything already, or desiring to have all of your burning questions answered by the text. If the Bible really is divine, then it won't do those things for you anyway. God never seems to work that way, much to my own frustration. Instead, embark into a journey with these texts where you enter into the land of these texts and you experience them as the original author and their audience were experiencing them at the time. And through that, allow yourself to experience the same God that they experienced in your daily life today.